The reason for the large crowd here at the Hamiltonian tonight is we're going to roast Ohio Representative Mike Fox. Can you roast somebody who really deserves respect? More than insults, more than jokes? Yeah, you can. Just watch and see. I'm Colleen Armstrong for Hamilton TV 11. Stay with us. Mike, how does a shy, modest, self-effacing individual like yourself handle all this attention?
Well, I take solace in the fact that Dick Fitton told me just before we started tonight that I'm really not as bad as they're going to say I am tonight. So I just kind of roll with the punches.
Well, when I get Ray Combs up here, I'm going to remind him that you are an Ohio State representative and you do deserve some respect. So I'll help you out, okay?
I don't think that'll work with Ray.
I don't either. I don't either. I've been reading your biographical information, and the interesting thing is how often your parents appear named in your info. That's very important to you, isn't it, to give them the credit for the character that you are today?
Well, I don't know if they want all the credit for the character that I am, but I've been blessed with two great parents. My father is deceased now, my mother, and they've just been there when I needed them, and that's what everybody needs today. I appreciate the fact that I had that.
Yeah, and of course you want to say something nice about your wife and your two lovely children, Ashley and Ryan, your wife Marianne.
Absolutely. You know, anyone that's in the public limelight, the stresses on families generally are tough today, but my wife goes through an awful lot. I'm gone a lot. My family goes through an awful lot, but I've been blessed with two wonderful children, Ashley and Ryan, good support at home, and I'm just very lucky.
Yeah. 20 years in politics, that's a long time.
It's really amazing to look at. I had a college Republican come up to me that's helping me tonight saying, after he looked at the brochure, he says, you know, you've been in the legislature longer than I've been alive. And I said, please don't remind me.
And it's only the beginning. We're going to be reminding you about a lot of things like that tonight. So we'll talk to you a little bit later.
Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Mike Fox, our guest of honor. Rick Siegel, you've had so many titles I lose track. Tell me exactly what you are now.
Well, today I'm managing director of Hensley Siegel Rentschler. We're a marketing communications firm based out of Cincinnati.
And you were once Mike Fox's first campaign manager?
Yeah, that of course was 1974. I was senior at Taft High School.
You were 16 years old, Rick.
I wasn't a senior. I was even younger than that. So. Yeah, we had been, in that period of time, had really been very successful in building a very large organization of teenagers in a teenage Republican club here in Hamilton, and Mike, being a very savvy politician, tapped into that resource as part of his first effort to be elected to the legislature.
Do you think something like that would fly today, a teenager as a campaign manager?
I wish it would. I mean, I think that one of the things that happened for me in that experience was being able to learn that our political system is really an open system, and being able to see that, have that opportunity to see that at such an early age, I think really has helped me not only to succeed in some political endeavors of my own subsequently, but more importantly, enabled me to see that the free enterprise system operates the same way. So, you know, I hope that it could. It was a great experience for me.
You're not only an avid politician yourself, but an avid political fan. I'm sure you follow everything, don't you?
Yeah, well, I've, you know, once it's in your blood, as they say, you never get it out. Over the past few years, I've concentrated a little more on my professional endeavors, but I think even through all these years, I still regard myself as one of Mike's lieutenants.
And also a fan?
Oh, very much so. I think that Mike Fox has been just a great personal friend to me, and the kind of friend that he just would lay down anything to go carry water for you. And I think that's the kind of friend he's been to me. I hope that's the kind of friend I've been to him. And I think the reason so many people are here tonight is because that's a friend he's been to a lot of people here in this district for 20 years.
Great. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of you later, won't we? Rick Siegel.
Thank you.
Mike McConnell from WLW's Midday. I understand Mike Fox has been a fairly frequent guest on your show.
I'll bet over the years at least a dozen times. Maybe a half dozen in person and probably a dozen more on the phone. He's one of my favorites.
And he's kind of opinionated, isn't he?
He is. He's like me. He's a straightforward, straight-shooting kind of guy. And He generally has great ideas. When Mike's there, the lines generally light up, and it's a pretty intelligent group of people listening, so they kind of think Mike's a sharp guy too.
Give us an example of something he said one time that got an enormous, overwhelming reaction.
One of the big ones was the proposal to disallow driver's licenses to dropouts. It was next to impossible to find somebody who could disagree. But the people who called, the lines lit up, but it was mainly to agree with them. They thought it was one of the best ideas to come down the pike in a long time. And it was a favorite of mine, too.
So it doesn't have to be controversial with a lot of disagreement to have a good show, right?
No, it doesn't. If it's a good idea, the good idea will fly. And generally speaking, Mike's had an awful lot of them. He really has.
Give us a couple more examples of some things that you two feel right in sync as far as your opinions, political or otherwise.
Politically, we're pretty much right on the money. I mean, anything that has to do with education and particulars I'm having trouble coming up with. Mike is one of those guys where I'll read something usually in the Journal News, and it hits a hot button with me right away. And the things that hit a hot button with me are usually the same things that hit a hot button with the audience. So you just give Mike a call, and whether he can come down or he's on the phone from here or from Columbus, whatever the case may be, he's always there, and he lays it out succinctly. And he's one of the few guests who's been on there several times where I can't think of anyone who's ever called and said that guy's an absolute nut. It hasn't happened with Mike Fox.
We'll see what happens after tonight, won't we?
Yeah, well, I'll do my best.
Mike McConnell from WLW. Bill Cunningham on WLW. You are the voice of the common man.
Don't forget about women, half the human population. They need leadership too, and damn it, I'm here in Hamilton to provide it.
I would never forget about women.
Well, I tell you what, it was a great trip here to Hamilton. I live in Madeira. The Hamiltonian is one of the great five-star hotels in America. They have valets, they got waiters and waitresses, the finest food money can buy. It don't get no better than this. And I'm happy to be here with Mike Fox and all these fine residents of Butler County. Mike and I go back to the good old days when I bailed him out when he had those girlfriend problems. He had the passing bad check problems. He had all those difficulties, and I was there when he needed me. He called me. I came up again to see him.
You don't need an interviewer, you know that?
Hell no. Hell no. But I got a few zingers here. I hope they work.
I'm sure they will.
Yeah.
If the common man could sit down with Mike Fox for 5 minutes, what would he say to him?
Well, Mike Fox believes in the preeminence of the human spirit. See, Democrats think the best thing to do is give somebody a fish every day for the rest of their lives. Republicans believe give somebody a damn fishing rod, teach them how to fish, they can feed themselves. Democrats believe in welfare and socialism. They believe in medicine controlled by the state. Republicans say let individual Americans, proud young Americans that tame the wilderness from those damn savages we now call Native Americans, who built this great country to where it is, decide for ourselves how to run our own lives. Get out of our closets, get out of our cars, out of our laps, quit roadblocking our city streets, let the proud Americans who built America, the arsenal of democracy, to flourish. Democrats want everyone to be on the government bottle, sucking until they're dry. Republicans say, get rid of the damn bottle, we can do it ourselves.
Thanks for being here on the Bill Cunningham Show.
God bless America, and God bless Michael Fox.
Now, Ray, this is an Ohio State representative. You've got to show the proper respect.
I'm going to do my best tonight to respect him as he deserves. I mean, most prisoners don't get 20 years, and I think it's time that Mike Fox gets his due tonight, so I'm here for that.
When you talk about what he deserves, I get instantly suspicious because I know you too well.
Well, when you see the roster, I'm the least of the people that have come to pay their respects, let's say, it's kind of neat to get an invitation that says, Friends of Mike Fox, $125 for an individual, $150 for a couple. That's to be his friend. I mean, I know places for $2 a minute you can talk to people, so this is the kind of guy we're dealing with. But actually, we love him, and that's why we're here.
Okay, well,
I'm reserving anything that I might say till the appropriate time to let it out.
I know, we don't want to spoil any surprises here tonight. You know, you've been getting a lot of attention just walking through this room.
I know.
Are you used to that yet?
I was always used to it, even before I was on television.
Even in junior high, you were used to that.
A head this big on a body this small, you stand out. But no, I'm excited to be here. A lot of great people from all over the state are here tonight, not just from Butler County. So Mike he owes a lot of people money, and they're here tonight to get that money.
Well, I'm going to look forward to your tributes to Mike Fox.
Oh, thank you so much. I've waited a long time to do this, and if you look straight ahead, and all your viewers who love you, look straight ahead. See, I've been waiting to do that for a long time. See, she was a counselor in junior high
I
school.
was a teacher in junior high.
You were a teacher, but you counseled me.
You better watch how you say that.
It's a pleasure to be
We'll
here.
catch up with you later.
Thank you.
Ray Combs. You don't need an introduction, do you?
Colleen Armstrong,
Ray Combs.
Channel 11.
We're standing here with some beautiful children. Two of them belong to Mike Fox. You are Mike's oldest son, Ryan. You are 12, right?
Right?
Okay, so far?
Yes.
I told you I was going to ask you this, so I warned you ahead of time. This is not going to be a surprise. On the few days that your father does take off, does he sit around like most fathers in his undershirt with his feet up?
Yes, he does.
Does he have chores for you to do around the house?
No, not really.
You don't have to do anything?
Nope.
Is that because he's not home much?
Mainly yes.
Oh, okay. You know, your dad is really a proponent of having driver's license taken away from kids who drop out of high school.
He is?
You didn't know that?
No, I didn't.
Well, that just proves you better not drop out of high school, okay?
Okay.
No chance of that, is there?
No, there's not.
Okay. Tell us about the trouble we had getting your sister over here.
She wouldn't come without her best friend, so we had to have her come.
All right. That's why we have two lovely young ladies here. The first one is Ashley, right? And you are how old?
9,
And your best friend, who is? Introduce her for us.
Missy Cox,
And she is how old?
8.
Missy, how does it feel to be on TV?
Weird.
You know, Ashley wouldn't come here without you. Tell us about being best friends with Ashley.
I like playing with her at recess and stuff. And she's funny and smart. She's pretty.
But your mom confused your names once. Tell us about that.
She was writing us down on a picture on this thing. It had the class pictures, and she was putting our names down. And she wrote Missy Fox and Ashley Cox.
What did you think about that?
Strange.
Tell us about Missy as a friend.
She's nice. She's funny, and she's nice.
Tell us about Ryan as an older brother.
He's a weirdo, and I hate him.
Tell us about your dad. Is he a pretty good guy?
I guess.
Do you sit in his lap very often?
No,
No. Why?
he's never around.
Oh. Well, maybe after he hears that, he's going to be around a lot more. Do you think?
No,
You don't think so?
no,
Why is that?
I don't know.
I can tell she didn't want to be on TV. It's a good thing you're here, Missy. Let's give Ryan equal time. Tell us about having Ashley as a younger sister.
It's okay. Sometimes she can have a big mouth, and she's a pain in the butt.
What a happy family. Isn't this great? Thanks, you guys. I'm sure this is going to be very memorable for your dad. Thanks a lot. Congressman John Boehner, again, it's nice to see you again.
Nice to see you. Glad to be here.
Tell us something about congressmen and representatives, politicians in general, that people don't understand.
Well, it's a crazy business. It just never stops. Your demands on your time, the number of places you're supposed to be, you can only do a fraction of them. But nobody ever understands that. But what I try to do is be on time. Mike Fox is never on time. Now Mike Fox's watch is 45 minutes short of Greenwich Mean Time. So he's always late.
Is this a good time to mention that he got here tonight before you did?
Yes, he did. I'm shocked, and I'll probably talk about it tonight.
Okay, well, he's the guest of honor. I guess he should have been here earlier.
Well,
so you're forgiven?
You would think, but you'll hear a lot of stories about it tonight.
Okay, we don't want you to spoil anything now.
No. It's all coming.
Okay. We'll check with you later. John Boehner, thank you very much.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
I met Mike Fox about 30 years ago. He was 14 years of age. He parked cars for me at the Hamilton Raceway. At that time, he was very intelligent. He knew who the heavy tipper was, and he always saved a good spot for him, and he came out with more money than anybody on the parking lot. Mike is a legislator. First place, he sat next to me for the last 12 years in leadership. He dictated the Republican caucus. I know anybody can get up on his feet. He's a little bit light, but as light as he is, he can get up quicker than anybody ever knew and debate a bill, and always seemed to be nearly right. And I don't care when I asked him about a bill, he knew what was in it. Mike's a great friend, a great loyalty. I think a lot of him. He could have been a great lawyer. He went on to law school. He could be making $400,000 or $500,000 a year being an attorney. And all the years I've known him, he was always on time at once. Well, on his 20th anniversary, for a young man like him, I just wish he'd go on, stay skinny like he is, and go back to law school.
Michael, I'm very sorry that I can't be with you this evening, but I want you to know that my thoughts are with you, and I'm going to be with your friend and my friend, say Corwin Nixon, and I just want to wish you the very best. But let me get into some things I think that your friends here should know. First, Michael, with the way you work and the way you represent people and the things you stand for, you should be a Democrat and not a Republican. And some people today accuse you of being a Democrat. Now, if you want to change your registration, I'll see that you'll have no opposition in the primary, and we'll get that job done for you. But I don't know of anyone, being sincere for just a moment, then I'll get back to some other things. I don't know of anyone that works any harder than Mike does for his people. And I really don't know anyone that knows and understands issues when he goes to the floor of the House or in the committees. Mike knows what he's talking about when he gets on the floor. The only thing wrong with Mike when he gets on the floor, he talks too long. He ought to cut down his speeches just a little bit, because other people would really appreciate that, I'm sure. I've had members from both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, that say, won't you shut Mike off? He talks too long. But being what he is, and the friend that he is to me, in times when I have really needed some help, I've always been able to go to Mike, and he would give me a straight answer whether he could help me or not. And I'm going to tell you this, that means a lot in the legislature, for people to be honest with you and tell you the truth. And I'm happy that Mike is that type of a person. 20 years ago, when Michael first was elected and came to the legislature, that was my first year as Speaker. And I can tell you this, that there have been many, many times that I have cherished his friendship from the standpoint of helping me to understand the problems of his own district. The times that he's had me down in his own district in meetings to discuss the problems of his district. And this is a type that Mike is, that he's always working and looking out after the best interests of the people that he represents. You know, I don't know of anyone, when you get into talking about the issues of human services, I don't know of anyone that knows the problems there any more than Mike does. Many, many times, and when I say I've gone to him on those issues many times. And a while ago I was jokingly saying that Mike talks too long on the floor. I was really joking, because when he does talk, when he does state what the problems are with people that need help, people that are in need of public assistance, Mike really knows what he's talking about, and people do listen to him. Mike, I want to congratulate you on the 20 successful years that you've had. Hope you have many more, and I look forward that when I retire at the end of this year, this is my last year in the legislature, when I retire, that I can come back and visit with you. And I want you to know this, it's been a real pleasure to knowing you, an honor to work with you, and I look forward to spending so many more years with you. Thank you very much, and good luck, and have a real good night tonight.
Well, Mike, I'm sorry I can't be with you and all of your friends who've gathered for this occasion to celebrate 20 years of service in the Ohio General Assembly. I don't know whether Butler County or the Ohio General Assembly will ever be quite the same with 20 years of Mike Fox's service. I'm sitting here in your office. You know, I often called on you, not in quite such a nice office when I was governor. These offices were only just opening, but called on you for help on legislation. I remember when we were trying to make workfare work, and you wondered whether a Democratic governor was serious, and I wondered whether a Republican state representative would cooperate. And Gail Channing became a great Mike Fox fan as a consequence. And when we got into education reform, you were one of the few people in the legislature in either party, I think, who was really willing to take the educators on, and I put you on the task force that looked at how we would reform education to get to the year 2000. I suspect we still have a lot of work to do, so for the next 20 years you can devote yourself to that kind of an exercise. I still would like to recruit you, though, to run occasionally when there's a Democratic vacancy. I'm not quite sure what you do about your party affiliation, but, you know, there are probably some Republicans who would welcome the chance to move Mike Fox on and get a real Republican in office. Oh, well, that's what happens when you speak your mind, and you've always been willing to speak your mind, and that's what happens when you work hard. You're always going to have some people who come at you on that. Do you still have those big bags under your eyes? Are you getting enough sleep, Mike? Do you rest every so often? Have you ever taken a vacation? I mean, these are important questions, and I think while you're with your friends, we ought to try to get some answers to these questions. And while we're at it, and before I conclude and go back to my hard work on behalf of health care for President Clinton, who incidentally wants you to help bring along some Republican votes in the House and Senate for his health care reform, I want your friends to have a chance to take a look at your, well, your spectacularly messy office space. I mean, I walked in here this morning and I discovered that either you need a huge Hoover that can simply suck all this stuff up, or you need someone who can work hard on what I'm sure was a childhood in which you clearly did not suffer from an over-strict toilet training. I mean, this is the example of someone who really thrives on a mess. Now, Mike, I'm going to get up, and if this camera can follow me, I have one decorating suggestion for your office, which will make it a much healthier work environment. Let me put it that way. So I'm going to get up and move past your chair if these things will let me. And on this wall, there's a dramatic set of pictures of Mike Fox with Ronald Reagan and Jim Rhodes and Corwin Nixon and all sorts of illustrious Republicans. And I think right here, you ought to put this tiny photograph of Mike Fox and Dick Celeste even shaking hands as evidence of your tremendous bipartisan capabilities. Mike, I join with your friends and your well-wishers there in Butler County to say we really appreciate the 20 years of public service you've given, the spirit in which you serve your constituents, and I know I'll be running into you at airports talking about public policy for a long time to come. All the best.
I wish I could be there tonight to join you in paying tribute to State Representative Mike Fox. For 20 years, Mike has worked hard for the people of the Hamilton-Fairfield area as a member of the Ohio General Assembly. Even though his years in the legislature have been spent as a member of the minority party, Mike has been remarkably effective in sponsoring and enacting major legislative initiatives. And by the way, Mike's going to be in the majority next year. Mike is recognized by his colleagues and other State House observers as one of Ohio's most hardworking and articulate legislators. He is particularly known for his leadership in health care, human services, and education reform. At a time when we all must work harder and smarter and do more with less, we need Mike's leadership to help us fight for those changes in government that give Ohio's taxpayers a better deal. I understand that quite a lineup of roasters is on hand tonight to make some observations about Mike's career. I really wish I could be there personally to make sure Mike gets what's coming to him. But just let me share one story about what it's like to work with Mike Fox. 4 years ago, the last weekend before the election, I was campaigning in Butler County. We had just completed a campaign stop in Middletown, and Mike got on our campaign bus for a ride to our next event in Hamilton. Now, you know, Middletown's only about 12 miles from Hamilton, but by the time we arrived at our destination, Mike had lobbied me about building the Butler Regional Highway, the Allen Road interchange, and a new classroom and conference facility on Miami's campus in Hamilton. I'm just grateful that Mike got off our campaign bus in Hamilton while there was still money left over for the rest of the state. Mike, the people of the Hamilton-Fairfield area have been fortunate to have you representing them in Columbus, and I really look forward to working with you for many years to come.
Let me join his many friends in congratulating Mike Fox. He served 20 years in the legislature. He served his state and his party. Barbara and I are proud to say to him, well done.
I'm excited to introduce the next part of the program, and I'm going to have the honor to introduce an individual, and without a doubt, our master of ceremonies is Hamilton's most famous citizen. All of America knows him as host of Family Feud, but some of you all know him as a hometown boy who graduated from Garfield High School. While he has gone on to become a shining star in the entertainment world, he has never forgotten his roots. He has given generously of his time, his talent, and his money to make Hamilton a better place to be. He has been recognized nationally for his contributions to Boys Clubs of America. He was recently honored to be chosen as one of Ohio's leading citizens by Governor George Voinovich, as he presented him the Governor's Award. He and his wife, Debbie, reside here in Hamilton, and his business office is located in Hamilton. He is one of us, and more importantly, he represents the best of all of us. It's my great honor and privilege to introduce Mr. Ray Combs.
Thank you. This is very exciting for me to be here tonight. Can you hear me in the back? Can you see me in the front? My name is Ray Combs, and for those of you who are not familiar, I am the host of Family Feud and have been on television a number of years. I'm one of many people who have come here tonight to pay tribute and give Mike Fox the due that he deserves for 20 years. There were many of us who knew Mike in previous years that thought that when the day came that we would reminisce about 20 years, it would not be for service, it would be for time served. And in fact, there are those in this room that still think that day might come too. But I am from Hamilton. You know, what's amazing to me when I am happy to be from this great town. I feel at home here, and because everybody treats me like they did when I grew up, like I'm nothing, but I'm the only host on television that if you have a large screen TV, I am actual size. So that makes me uniquely qualified to stand here and be the host tonight. And as I bring across this podium tonight a very distinguished panel, one of the most difficult things about an event like this when you've come to cherish a man, some people call roast. I say it's to pay homage. I don't know if it's with an A or an H. I went to Roosevelt, but I mean homage, and I say that in as humble as I can be with a silent H, is that they sometimes get long. So if some of these distinguished roasters, and I don't care how important you are in the public life or how popular you might be in the other media, if you start to go down, I'm going to pull you off this microphone. For the sake of friends of Mike Fox, who for $125 you can be his friend. Or you can come with a buddy and two of you can be his friend for $150. I'm not saying that he's competitive, but I've made better friends for $2 a minute on the telephone. In fact, that's where I first met Mike, was on a party line. Of course, he was just listening. It was a state phone. I'll tell you, I'm proud to be here. Mike Fox. He is a legislator long before his time. He was always there. 20 years. I mean, do you realize most prisoners do not get this long? I mean, do you realize that if you had shot Mike Fox on the day that he got elected to office, you'd have been out of jail 14 years ago? What I'm saying is we need to change these laws. I mean, 3 years would have been long enough if he shot Mike. I don't think he should have to spend 6. How can a man continue to get reelected in a community such as Hamilton, Ohio, and the constituents he serves? You know, I'm truly amazed, and those of you who are not from Butler County and the areas that are represented, what scares me most as I stand here tonight is that for the past 6 years, I've hosted a show that asks questions of family members and people that you knew you would never see on Jeopardy. Now, what is scary about this, if you watch Family Feud, where you get frustrated, is that the answers that the people give to the 100 people we survey. We may ask a question of fact, but to win the game, you have to know what 100 average Americans said. And that's where you learn that 100 average Americans may think something totally different. And that's when it gets scary, because when you ask a family to name a state with new in its name, and a lady screams out, "I know this one, Nebraska," and the family's going, "Good answer, good answer." It's not that you're embarrassed for these people, it's that you realize these people are voters. Show me Clinton, cha-ching. The ability to communicate with your constituents will get you elected. Honestly, ask a family of Americans, what month does a woman begin to show when she is pregnant? A guy said, "I know this one, September." It could be, sir, but it just didn't make our survey. And here's where Mike has truly came through and shown his colors to continue to be reelected. To know your constituents is to get the power of that pull. You know, the founders of our Constitution were bright enough to know that perhaps some of the individuals of our country might not be bright enough to elect the most capable person as president, so the Electoral College was put in place. But states don't have that. You can still fool them, a la Mike. The popular vote is very popular, and no more so in the area he represents than the answer. And this is a real answer given on my show, which scares me. People say crime is one of the #1 issues concerning our country today. I ask a family of Americans, and may lightning strike me dead if I make it up. The top 7 answers are on that board. Name something that is cold when it first goes on. And the guy said, "Got to be handcuffs, Ray, got to be handcuffs." The whole family was clapping. "Good answer, D. You know you got this one. Show me handcuffs, Ray. Show me handcuffs." And I called for it. Show me handcuffs. Bam, #2 on our survey. I don't want to meet some of the people that we survey. I am not here to make fun of Mike Fox as others are. I am not here to hold him up for ridicule or embarrass him. He'll do that himself when he gets up to speak. I know this, that he does know his constituents well enough to know that, it's amazing to me. If you're not from here, you can't take offense because you're not from here. The fact that I'm wearing a suit, and I actually tied this tie. I grew up in a part of Hamilton, Ohio, where if you had a tie, it was tied one time, and you kept it on the doorknob forever. In fact, Bob Lear's wearing it tonight. He bought it from me at another charitable auction, and he's a doctor. But this is our community. I didn't graduate from Garfield High School, but I got my equivalency test later. It's amazing. You look back on your past. My high school is a junior high now. Garfield is a junior high. Roosevelt is a church, and it certainly wasn't when I went there. And it's not that they changed Garfield to a junior high, it's just that they did test scores of the students and found out that we were graduating with a 9th grade reading level. And that's Mike's constituents right there. Mike has been one to go around to people and, when he says put an X, he means an X, because a lot of the people in his constituency cannot read, and that's good, because if they ever read about Mike, they wouldn't vote for Mike. And those who listen to radio love WLW, and they love Mike, and because Mike secretly pays the 2 gentlemen a lot of money. But here's how I know, and I can appreciate and support and keep this program moving. Tonight, from the great state of Ohio, there is diversity represented in this room. A bipartisan representation, people from both parties who have come here to laugh at Mike Fox. It's amazing to me, and I will recount this as honestly and truly as I can. Last year, many of you who are from this area, you might have seen it on television, my agent called and said, "Ray, Robin Leach wants to talk to you. He wants you to be on Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous." I said, "Now hold on. He wants to come to my home in California? He says, no, he wants to come to where you grew up in Ohio. So he calls me up, and I said, you know, come on down. I told him where I lived, and he said, Ray, is Hamilton the exclusive area of Cincinnati? You be the judge when you get here, Robin. I don't want to make that call. And if you're not from here, you can't understand that Michael Fox is the kind of person that never let people make fun of Hamilton, Ohio, my hometown, when he was in Columbus. Never. Michael Fox is the kind of man that when someone stood up in the quiet chambers of the Ohio Senate and said some secret thing or joke about Hamilton, you know you're staying at a hotel in Hamilton, Ohio, if you call down to the front desk and say, I got a leak in my sink, and they say, go ahead. He would always stand up. But I have to let you know, this is a true story. I gave the information to Robin Leach about Hamilton, Ohio. I faxed it to him. It was a pre-interview. He called me back in 5 minutes. Ray, there seems to be some problem here. It says that the airport that we land in is in Kentucky. Why is that? I said, to get you ready for Hamilton. Now, here's where Mike Fox comes in touch with his constituency. He says, Ray, but I don't understand. How do I get to your mansion? My mansion up in Hamilton. All right, here's what you do. He says, I'm using Marvin's limousine service. No, don't do that. You want to go to Budget Rent-A-Car. You're going to land in Hebron, Kentucky. Go over to Budget Rent-A-Car very quickly. Don't get a car, get a panel van with as few windows as possible. This is going to help you as you come through the second ward of Hamilton to get to my mansion. I'll explain later. But what I want you to do is I want you to head east, and this is where I think Mike Fox really comes into play. You're going to head east from Kentucky, from the airport, till you see a highway with orange barrels. Head north. These orange barrels will lead you to Ohio. They go from one end of the state to the other. There's no work, there's just the Orange Barrel Freeway. This was a bill Mike Fox passed, Orange Barrel Freeway. As you head north across this large body of water, it's the Ohio River. It's owned by Kentucky, but they don't know it. Keep on going. You'll pass Cincinnati, drive 5 miles till you see the Norwood Lateral. You hang a right, you go for 7 miles till you see I-71. Take that north for 5 miles to 275 west till you get to Route 4. It's 17 miles out of your way, but once you go through Norwood, Hamilton is going to look a little better. And that's all I'm asking you to do, shop around. Mike Fox is a man that helped make me what I am today, a puny little unemployed game show host. And we're going with this next fellow coming up. I can't, I could see why. Oh, this gives me great pleasure. I'm going to continue these little things all night. I surveyed 100 people about you myself, Mike, and asked the number one reason, what we can say about why you got your job, and lucky was number one. When it comes to commentary, and I want to say friendships, and being an American and a patriot, our next presenter or commentator is unparalleled. He is a true blue American. He's heard by millions of people. They know him as the voice of the common man. He's on 700 WLW. Mike has been fortunate enough to suck up to him as a guest on his show on many occasions. Mike just recovered from surgery where he recently had his lip removed from Bill Cunningham's behind. And to get Bill to come here tonight, I give you Mr. Bill Cunningham, ladies and gentlemen.
Guess I better pull this microphone up a little bit here. But we originally did a draw behind stage, and I was first, and I said, put me behind Bob Taft. He's a very easy man to follow. And time got a little bit short here. I'm on the air tonight, so I was also given a list of celebrities that couldn't be here tonight. I was very shocked. A lot of people couldn't come. The committee met, and they invited to Hillary Clinton. She couldn't make it, though. We were told the invitation went to her Rose Law Firm, and it was shredded. I mean, there was nothing. And Michael Jackson was invited from Hollywood, but he sent his regrets. He said he was going to stay home with the kids. So we expect him to be here maybe later. Dr. Stanley Broadnax sent his regrets. He said, I can't make it. Judge Les Gaines and I have a victory dinner tonight. And I understand Cincinnati Mayor Roxanne Qualls was invited tonight to attend, but she had a very quiet, intimate dinner with Dagmar Celeste, and she couldn't make it. I had heard yesterday in the news that a creature whose facial resemblance was like a bald eagle was shot. So I thought Dick Celeste would send his regrets. And I didn't notice Michael Fox has a lot in common with Lanny Guinier and Zoe Baird and Kimball Wood, each one at cabinet positions, but it didn't work out very well. I watched Bob Taft's eyes going, be careful, be careful. And I made a remark to Mike McConnell, last time this many political crooks got together, it was Bill Clinton's cabinet meeting. I said, I've seen a lot of these people. And there was a precursor to the Nancy Kerrigan attack. About a year ago, Tanya Harding set a hit team to take care of Fox outside a movie theater. Tanya Harding. And she kicked your ass pretty good, I'm told, didn't she? Maybe I shouldn't say that with Phil Burris here in the room. Phil, I'm sorry. Very much so, but I'm very happy to be here. I was watching Mike Fox eat, and he was eating so fast that he kept throwing water on his silverware. It was overheating. The guy was... I don't want to say Mike is fat, but he qualifies for group insurance. He gets a rate. And old Mike Fox believes in that old adage that politics is like sex. You don't have to be good at it to enjoy it. And he also believes in the old adage that politicians seem to fall in two groups. Those that do their best, like Mike, and those who do their constituents, like Bill Clinton. Every year he makes all these campaign promises. They go in one year and they go out the other. And the furniture. I mean, you know, I talked to Mike's wife. He has a furniture problem. His chest fell into his drawers. I mean, it's terrible. But I had a few other zingers, and I'm on the air in about 40 minutes downtown. I got to go. But I want to say I've known Mike for about 6, 7 weeks. And the guy, we have something at the big one called the Celebrity Hotline. Every time it rings, and I said, well, is it Boehner or Fox this time? I mean, I can't believe it. But I'm very happy to be here with right-thinking Republicans. I've said on the air many times that Democrats like to give Americans fish every day. Just keep giving them fish. And Republicans like to give the American people a fishing rod, saying, here are the directions, go fish yourself. And I'm very happy to participate. And God bless America, and thank you very much.
You know, people say, let's get a picture of Mike sucking up there. Let's wait. It's a pleasure to have him here. We love him. Stop that thing. They're watching you. Oh, how about a hand for Bill Cunningham, ladies and gentlemen? Is he gone? Didn't you guys feel uncomfortable with him in the room? And I just felt like every time I would say a joke, he's like... See, one of the greatest fears when you're at one of these things is that you're going to have to follow somebody whose presentation is so strong that it's going to make yours... Bring us back down to adult size. I'm the only roaster tonight who's wearing a suit made by Mattel. So I am here to bring you now a man who is the only person probably capable of following someone to the measure of the stature of Bill Cunningham, a man who has been a friend of Mike Fox for many years. Back in 1970, Mike campaigned for his father, Robert Taft, as a candidate for the United States Senate. In 75, they served in the General Assembly together, and he's pretty much known as like the Johnny Carson of Secretary of States. And so, you know, it's not fair to put a professional politician up after a comedian, so we're going to to put him up before Mike. And I want you to welcome tonight Secretary of State Robert Taft, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks a lot. I'll tell you, what a tough act to follow, Coombs and Cunningham, but I'm delighted to be here because this is payback time. I had to endure 5 years serving in the Ohio House with Mike Fox, and the first 3 years, they weren't too bad, but the second 2 years on the floor of the House, Mike got in the habit of starting to test out his news stories and his jokes on all the members, and he'd tell these things. He's got the award for the 10 longest jokes ever told on the floor of the Ohio House. He also has the award for the 10 worst jokes ever told on the floor of the Ohio House. But we did go back a long, long way. 1970, we both got our start in my dad's campaign for the U.S. Senate, and that's when Mike, if you want to know what Mike looked like, there's a picture in the program of him with Jim Rhodes here. That's how thin Mike was back then, which is just kind of inconceivable now. But in 1976, when I got to the state legislature, it was Mike Fox who, out of the kindness of his heart, took me around and introduced me to all the other Republican legislators, and that really meant something then because Mike had just gotten to Columbus, you see. They didn't know him yet, and he still had good relations with all the Republican legislators. Mike is a Republican. You may not believe this after tonight, but he is a Republican. You know, how long has Mike been in the legislature? It seems like just forever. And just to get a sense of how long he's been there, you probably never read this record. This is about the heaviest legislative record I've ever seen, but if you look on page 13, it says, this document only highlights a portion of his work in the legislature. Many committee records, particularly from his earlier years, have been misplaced or lost in the Historical Society archives. My God, we're talking about a guy for the 19th century here. But Mike's been a very prolific legislator. You know, 461 bills and resolutions, almost unbelievable, over 4,000 pages, and everybody's wondering up there, you know, what is Mike Fox up to? I mean, almost none of them pass. They don't get into law. Why is he doing this? And then what they don't know is what I know, is that he represents the district with a lot of paper companies. Champion, Beckett. It's a jobs program for his district. That's why he introduces all those bills. Mike is never one to sit on the sidelines. He always takes sides. You know, he wants to get involved. He's always out front on the presidential campaigns. You know, he always picks winners. You remember back in 1980, Mike got way out front for a guy named John Connally. You remember John Connally, don't you? It went very far. John Connally was the guy in the debates with Bush and Reagan. He said, I am the only candidate running for president who has been declared innocent by a jury of his peers. Apparently that appealed to Mike. I am going to say some good things about Mike, but I just can't help but comment on his eating habits and his eating style. You know, Mike is a gourmet. He loves good food. I was a little out of touch in '89 when I started running for governor. I didn't know about this, okay? So I said, I'm going to go over and work on Mike Fox and try to get his support for me for governor. And I said, I'll just call him up, go over his office 10 minutes, and, you know, I'm sure he'll help me out. He called him up, said, Bob, why don't we go out to dinner? Okay, we go out to dinner. He picks one of the best restaurants in Columbus. Well, about 4 hours later, 4 courses later, bottle of wine, we emerged from the restaurant. I was about $85 poor, and I still didn't have his endorsement. But seriously, I do want to say that, you know, Mike, I don't know. I know a lot of people, obviously, in elective office in Ohio. I don't know anybody who knows more about politics, more about the governmental process than Mike Fox. I don't know of any person who has done more for his district. I've seen Butler County emerge and develop and grow and expand, and really Mike's been integral to that. He's fought hard. He's really brought home the kind of support that you need from Columbus. Mike is also a person who pioneers on the tough issues. I've never seen anyone like that. Whether it's workfare or school choice, Mike takes those on. He works hard. Most importantly, from my standpoint, Mike has been a very good friend. He's been very loyal. Whenever I needed help, whenever I needed advice, he was there for me. So I want to say seriously, Mike, thank you for your service. Congratulations on 20 years. I look forward to many more years of working with you in office in Columbus. Thanks.
I'm taller than Stallone. But he's not here tonight to prove it. Coming to this podium next is a gentleman that has worked with Mike. Well, they've been in legislative endeavors together for many years. Right now they are sponsoring, this is amazing. I didn't realize as I read, this is really interesting. It was handed to me, Mike's legislative record over 20 years. Someone said, here it is, over 20 years, this is his record. Well, it's got lipstick on it, it's not really it. I said, yes, it is. That is really his record right there with lipstick on it. It came from that 900 number. Oh, no, it's his own lip print. I'm not saying anything other than he wears lipstick and he kissed his own record. In this record is some very impressive things on crime. Our next speaker is right now co-authoring legislation that expedites the execution of murders by streamlining the appeals process. I didn't realize that Mike not only believed in an electric chair, but he believed in electric bleachers. He's worked well with this next senator, state senator, happens to be the Ohio State Assistant President Pro Tem, and he's here tonight. Would you welcome the Honorable Eugene Watts, ladies and gentlemen.
Wow, a Mike Fox roast. In Vietnam, Mike, we called this a target-rich environment. I'll tell you. Not only that, but Mike started off the evening by giving me a mild insult just to provoke me a little bit. Said, Gene, I think you're gaining a little weight. Mike, this is my real weight. I was on a Republican diet during the 1980s. I could only eat during Paul Piper victory parties. So it proves that old adage in Ohio, if at first you don't succeed, try again. If it doesn't work, go for the Supreme Court, which is about the only office Mike hasn't expressed an interest in, by the way. And I'm not going to retaliate tonight, Mike, by commenting upon your girth. I will point out, however, that last week the Ohio House passed a resolution naming Mike the most likely to explode. Mike has been in the House for, obviously, for a very long time. Some people think you should have been in the big House that long a time. And he has, as he points out to us, a very long and distinguished record of achieving great things for Ohioans in a lot of different areas, and we're very proud of that. In fact, now that we have term limits, we're particularly proud that Mike created workfare to give him something afterwards. And you know, Mike did come to the state legislature at the same time that Richard Nixon resigned the presidency. Only one bad thing happened that year, and I really liked Richard Nixon, Mike, but we are going to win control of the House. Mike's always been in the minority. And this year we are going to win control of the House of Representatives, which might, in fact, make Mike a committee chairman. Now that makes a lot of people in this room very nervous, mainly House Republicans. Democrats also give Mike a hard time, too. Let's say we do have bipartisan attacks on Mike, but they're just simply not as bright as he is. That's all. In fact, when the legislature passed the legislation to ban pit bulldogs in Ohio, a lot of the House Democrats thought they were finally getting rid of Mike Fox, as a matter of fact. That might be, in fact, why Mike explored other possibilities, political possibilities during his career. For example, I still remember when Mike was Human Services Director. What a wonderful day that was. Well, you're sort of uneasy in this role because we're all well aware that Mike is great at one-upsmanship. No question about that, and anybody who stands up here knows that we're going to get our turn. And I know that he's done this throughout his career, and recently, in fact, to me, he learned that Dagmar Celeste had called me public enemy #1 at the gay lesbian rally in Columbus, and that upset Mike. He thought he deserved that distinction. And so he arranged to put himself on the Donahue Show. Now, I can't wait to see that, Mike. I think you're going to be like the moose at a gazelle convention in that setting. Now, I appreciate people putting me up early in the program because I have to disappear quickly. I started early this morning in Cincinnati and have to get back home to be with my family or I'm going to be in big trouble, but I'd be in even bigger trouble if I didn't send you special regards from my wife, Toni. As many of you know, she was the attorney for the House Republican Caucus for about a decade. As you may not know, Mike Fox is one of her very special friends and people she's very fond of, and so am I. I share that. And it's because he's bright and compassionate and innovative and so damn interesting. And so, Mike, for my family, Toni, my daughters, Julie McKenzie, to you, and Mary Ann, and Ryan, and Ashley, the very best. And it's a pleasure to be with you here tonight.
Shoot me from the chest up. It's a pleasure to be here. And I know Michael Jordan feels. You can actually see down people's tops here, too. It's not a pretty sight. Ladies and gentlemen, coming to this podium now is someone that I believe is the right height for this microphone. A great American. Our next guest is the Republican leader of the Ohio House. She and Mike have been colleagues for over a decade, and she has the distinction of being the first woman leader of the House Republican Caucus. It's my pleasure to introduce a woman who, she's ready. She's just 4 votes away from becoming the next Speaker of the Ohio House of Representatives, Honorable Joanne Davidson.
Ray, I want you to know that those of us at the front table breathed a sigh of relief when you started your comments, because when we watched all the nice things that were said in the testimonials, we were rapidly scribbling through all of our remarks to try to redo them because we thought this was going to be something other than what we had hoped it would be, which is a roast of Mike Fox. And when we looked at the list of the people that were presenters, we realized that there was only one person that had enough information to use about them that they could have this many people that would come to the podium and roast him. Now, with the Speaker not here, you understand that I'm the only one in the room who needs Mike Fox's vote, so I got to be just a little bit careful about what I say. But I am here to make a few comments on behalf of the House Republican Caucus, the people who serve with him. And I was watching Dick Celeste when he was in Mike's current office, and I happened to think about that because I had the unfortunate experience of having an office across from Mike's early in my legislative career. And we were kind of squirreled back here in these little offices, and I thought if Celeste thought that was bad, he should have seen that one. Well, one of the things that I learned early on, I didn't know Mike Fox very well then, is that he hogs all the space, wherever he is, doesn't make any difference, and he hogs all the staff. Now, he did it then, he did it now, and when I walked in tonight and I saw all of these people marching around with these little badges on that says Fox staff, I realized why I complained to the Speaker all the time that we don't have enough staff to make the caucus work, because he has them all and he uses them all the time. Let me tell you that I served on the Finance Committee with Mike for 12 years. He had the seat right at the end of the table, and Tom Johnson, his good friend, is our ranking member there, and we always looked around, and Fox was never there. We didn't know what he was doing. We didn't know where he was, and we always kind of wondered, you know, whether or not he was going to show up. Well, the last day of the budget hearing, Mike Fox would walk in, and now we know the paper company, with this kind of stack of amendments. And what we didn't know is all the time that we were sitting there listening to some of the redundant testimony, Mike Fox was out running around, making deals, getting agreements to put amendments in the budget bill, and he walked in with this stack. And you see that package you have on your table tonight? If he'd have gotten all of those amendments in there, it would have been a lot higher than it is. But he worked very hard at doing that. Has great ideas. Sometimes, however, it always kind of reminds me a little bit of one of those guys, you know, in the olden times that used to stand on the back of the wagon and kind of market that snake oil. Great idea, going to solve all your problems. There were only these little details that he didn't tell us about. In fact, recently we have a number of new members in our caucus, and one of them said to Gene Krebs, Marilyn Reed said to Gene Krebs, you know, does Mike Fox have a lot of pilots in his district? And Gene said, I don't know. I don't understand that question. What do you mean? And she says, well, he has all these pilot programs. She said, I figured he must have an awful lot of pilots in his district to take care of that. Well, and when we won our races in 1992, and we picked up 8 seats, and our numbers went up to 46, which I think makes the most members that you ever had an opportunity to serve with. Instead of talking about the 46-member Republican caucus, we talked about the 45-member and Mike Fox. Now, he is not known for short speeches. That was mentioned this evening. He is not known for short telephone conversations. In fact, at one time, we realized that he single-handedly kept one cellular telephone company in business in Ohio for a period of time. And the budget director finally came to us and said, could you pass legislation to require them to charge more for calls that are made after midnight rather than those that are made before, so he could get some sleep? Some of the best stories, and he won't come up and tell them, are Representative Tom Johnson. When they started out in the legislature, they roomed together. Now, he swore me to secrecy on some of these stories, but Mike had this habit of when he would come in and he would leave the car door open and he'd run in and out of the apartment, moving all this junk in that they carry back and forth with them, except one night he closed the car door and didn't look in it. When he went back out in the morning, he opened the door, this cat sprung out. He had locked up in his car all night, and I wondered where this cat had come from and what he was doing in his car. Some of the best stories around the State House are those that we tell about Mike Fox. And if you ever see us together around a dinner table, we're telling Fox stories. And I suspect when the Speaker writes that book that he talks about writing, there'll be a chapter on Mike Fox. But let me just say that some of the best legislative ideas around the legislature are also Mike Fox's, and many of those have been mentioned this evening. And he certainly has authored many of the things that we point to with pride from the Republican caucus. He is passionate about the ideas that he feels very strongly about. One of those is medically fragile children, and I have watched him almost single-handedly work to improve the climate and the care for medically fragile children in Ohio. That's what he feels about Hamilton and this district in Butler County. I have seen him time and again do the hard work to get for you those things that he needs. He is one of the hardest workers, most innovative member of our caucus. And Mike, we congratulate you on your 20 years, and we are proud to call you a caucus member, and we are proud to call you a friend. Thank you.
There's a lot of butt kissing going on here tonight, ladies and gentlemen. But there's few people like our next speaker that could tell the real story of Michael Fox. Now, I'll tell you, you know, as was so duly noted, Michael Fox became a young legislator. And at a young age, our next speaker knew him as a child. And we know that Mike Fox overcame a lot of handicaps himself that he doesn't mention. Kind of certain things that are taboo, as you get a little older, you grow out of them. It was a problem in his family, but I'll be very candid. I learned from our next speaker that Mike Fox was a bedwetter. It was not that that's so unusual, but he wet the bed up to the time he was 14, and that's not so unusual, but he did it from the dresser. That's what made him stand out in his family. He's always had his own way of doing things. Our next speaker began, in fact, this is the person we ought to be lynching. He began Mike's campaign 20 years ago as his first campaign manager. Mike refers to him as a true genius when it comes to politics. And I would say that if he's kept Mike in 20 years, he is a true genius. He is now the CEO of one of Cincinnati's premier marketing firms, Hensley, Siegel, and Rentschler, and he has received numerous awards and recognition for that particular field of excellence. He's in the program, as you might see. His family still resides in Hamilton, where he grew up. He is active in his community and his church. He remains close to Mike today. I'm going to introduce him. I don't know that it's his real name. He just got back to Hamilton from the Witness Relocation Program. And I present to you Richard A. Siegel, ladies and gentlemen. The man. The myth. Have fun.
Ray was only too glad to bring another vertically impaired person to the podium finally. You know, before I get started, we're here to pay tribute to Mike, but I want to take the opportunity to say some kind words about somebody else. It's really good to see Bob and Ruth Ann Bennett here tonight. You know, I think all of us maybe have a handful of people that we look back in our life and say these were people who really played an important role in shaping our lives, and certainly I'm here to pay tribute to one of them tonight. But Bob and I, they're the kinds of people that we haven't done a good job of keeping in touch with each other, but they're true friends. Bob Bennett goes to work with me every day. There are people at my office that probably, if they knew, they'd lynch him tonight for hearing all of these maxims and proverbs and things that were Bennettisms. He's been a great chairman of our party, and by the time he's done, he's going to be the stuff of legends and go down in history with Ray Bliss and other the great Republican leaders. And Bob, it's good to see you. Well, other than Ray Combs, I'm the only constituent on this panel. And I have a prepared statement, but as Ray told you, being from Hamilton, I do not know how to read. I have some real nice pictures here, but Mike doesn't want me to show them to you. You gotta love that picture on the back of this program, though. We helped put the program together, and I added that caption on the for the program. But somebody, I think it was probably Mike's mother, had written on the back of the photograph itself, Mike Fox, contemplating the problems of the world 240 pounds ago. But I'm one to talk, you know. How about that picture of Mike and me in the program there? One of our Democrat friends, Betty McGarry, saw that photo and proposed, well, once a geek, always a geek. And I said, how dare her? And she said, and I was told that she was talking about both of us. My personal pilgrimage at the side and service of Mike Fox began when I was 12 years old. And for 4 years later, he gave me the opportunity to direct his 1974 campaign, and it was a fountainhead experience in my life. Out of that experience came the opportunity to call many of you in this room my very dear friends. I met Darrell Barger, saw him earlier through that campaign, and it was Darrell who introduced me to my wife, Adrian, to Mike Hensley, my business partner, with who I've shared that experience the last 13 years. And though our career paths have headed in different directions, I really still consider myself one of Mike's lieutenants. And in fact, I know that I'm the guy that when he really, really has messed up and the bottom falls out, that he seeks me out for consolation. He'll come to me with some mess like a check and a Hell's Angel. You know, I'll give him some advice and some encouragement and send him back into the game. But somewhere during the course of that conversation, he'll get this big hangdog, teary-eyed look on his face, and he'll say, Rick, you're my one true friend. Everybody else I've ever put my faith and trust in as a friend has ultimately turned around and screwed me. And I'll say, Mike, that's okay. If the day should ever come that I'd be the one to screw you, you can count on it being a real big one. Well, 24 years I've listened to his crap. And now I've got a chance to get a few things off my mind. No, seriously, Mike Fox he has been my mentor, my rabbi, my teacher, tutored at his knee. I learned the lessons that have really served me well throughout my life. You know, Bill Bennett's got this book that's on the bestsellers list right now called The Book of Virtues. But it was Mike Fox who's taught me the real virtues of life. You can tell from my girth that, that he's taught me the virtue of immoderation at the dinner table. You know, in the advertising business, as a copywriter, we will often rely on the literary device of the double entendre. But it wasn't until I met Mike Fox that I knew anything of the idea of the double entree. And oh, what this man has taught me of the virtue of punctuality. I will remember one evening sitting in Bob Bennett's family room, sipping his cheap Chablis, waiting for Mike to show up to meet us at a 7:30 engagement. Well, he called about 8 o'clock and he said, "Don't worry, I'm on my way." Well, about 11, we were well into another jug of Krabari when Fox calls and said, "Be there real soon." Well, the next morning was always the occasion when we visited the Bennett's home, and Ruth Ann was serving breakfast to us all. The phone rang and said, "I'm on my way." Well, we went down to Republican headquarters there in Cleveland, and I think we taught a campaign seminar or something, and we went out to dinner afterwards and finally returned to the Bennett's for the evening, and at 7:30 p.m., 24 hours after his appointed time of arrival, Fox walks in and says, "Here I am." Which left me with the classic Fox maxim, "You're never late, so long as you're always on your way." And then, particularly being in a creative business as I am, it was Mike Fox who taught me the virtue of creative logistics. That is, that the shortest distance between 2 points is not necessarily a straight line. I remember another occasion when we were late getting out of Columbus. I think we were coming up to visit the Bennetts again. And we were late getting out of town. He says, "I've got to stop to pick up some candy, some suits, and some cigars." I said, "Okay." Well, about the time we got to Washington Courthouse, now we were going to Cleveland, remember? I said, "Mike, where are we going for this stuff?" And he said, "Well, we're going to Tri-County." I said, "Tri-County?" He says, "Yeah, that's where the candy is." I said, "Well, where in the hell are the cigars?" No wonder he's always kept us waiting. But the most profound lesson of all that he's taught me is the virtue of a healthy sense of competition. I don't know whether Dick Love is here tonight, the guy who was Mike's opponent in the first 1974 campaign, but when we ran against this gentle, good-natured man in 1974, Fox had my 16-year-old mind convinced that we were soldiers of the cross doing battle with the devil incarnate. And perhaps the reason Mike has so many enemies, he's just so doggone good at making them, you know? There have been times over the years where I've said to him, "Mike, I think you're getting a little paranoid." And he says, "Rick, you're not paranoid if they really are following you." And if he's hard on the Democrats, he saves the very best of this spirit of competition for the members of his own party. I think it's only fitting that Ray Combs is the host tonight, because for Mike Fox, there's no feud like a family feud. Well, Mike, in that spirit, let me put your troubled mind to rest on a couple things I know continue to concern you. First, Buzz Lukens is gone, Mike. He's not coming back. He's finished. Give it up. Just give it up. And I don't care what you've told me
I've thought about this, and John Boehner was just too damn young in November of 1963 to have been the man on the grassy knoll. But you know, whether you're here as his friend or his foe, I can almost bet that at some point over the last 20 years, Mike Fox has been there for you. The smoke of battles may have obscured your memory of that time, but I know he's carried water for you somewhere along the line. The Bible says that no greater love hath any man that he'd lay down his life for a friend. And that's the kind of friend that Mike Fox has been to me for 24 years. And it's the kind of friend I hope I've been to him. But most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, it's the type of friend that he's been to everyone in this room and in this district that he's served so well, and indeed all of the citizens of Ohio. And I'm only too proud to have shared something of that adventure and this evening with him. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rick. Get a picture of that. Yeah, stories you must know, I'll tell you. Kind of Orville Redenbacher to the max. It's great to hear those insights, and I think you alluded to it. I mean, a lot of people know, and I said it, and I'll say it every time I step to this podium. Mike Fox is a man that proves that you can measure past the fullness of your potential. He's not, no one will say he's the sharpest guy in the world. I said I would tell you, we surveyed 100 average people in Ohio, and we asked them about you, Mike. They said that you were so slow that it took you 2 hours to watch 60 Minutes. But this is what I can't figure out. Coming to the podium next is a man that, if you believe what the billboards claim, our next guest is always right. And if you ever listen to his show, you know that the billboard basically speaks the truth. He's entertaining, informative. He's obviously knowledgeable on many subjects. He's very fair on the issues. He's tough when he believes something. He is a refreshing voice of reason, as opposed to Bill Cunningham, who's not here tonight. And actually, I'm amazed that he would be here tonight because he is such a fine individual. Ladies and gentlemen, from 700 WLW Middays, Mike McConnell.
Thank you very much. Glad to see Bill Cunningham's out of here. That is seriously about the quietest I've seen that man in about 5 years on his podium. He is talking to himself right now in his car on the way to the station, more so than he talked when he was standing up here. It's great to be here, and great to meet friends of Mike Fox who I've not met before. And good to know there are some people here that he goes out with, socializes with, other than for $125 a play. This is the first time I've been out here. First time Mike ever called, tonight. Known the man for about 6 years. And Mike Fox really is, he's a talk host's dream. There are those perhaps on the House floor who are opposed to long-winded speeches. But there are those points in time when the news gets kind of slow. Nothing necessarily is going on. Nothing overly controversial. What do you do? What do you do at times like that in this town? Call Mike Fox. You try killing 20 hours a week when nothing's going on. The answer is you call Mike Fox. Occasionally, I'll leave on vacation. And you'll have people filling in. They don't do a great deal of talk. Just, they're happy to come in, do the job for you for a while. They have an idea of what they're going to do, but they say, how do I stretch this into 4 hours? Check the paper, see if Fox's name's in there. Mike Fox can run on. He's a bright man. I guess about 6 years I've known him, probably have him on at least 3 or 4 times a year. And generally he's a man with whom I'm in agreement. Most of you seem to be friends, colleagues, people have known him for a long time. I've not known him as long. I couldn't really tell you with regard to girth control where Mike would stand He's one of those guys who I guess he didn't just grow with the responsibility of the office, he bloated to a degree. He wants no one to make a fuss over him tonight. He wants everyone to treat him like you would any other great man, he told me on the way in tonight. His egotism could be nature's compensation for mediocrity. Could be, except this is not this man. With the shape he's in, his insurance agent is demanding his calendar and blotters back. Mike Fox is glad to talk on the program anytime. He's there at the drop of a hat. When it comes to campaign time, it's occasionally a different game. Mike is one of those, during a campaign, he'll take pretty much any question with an open mouth. You'll pose the question, there'll be a long pause, but generally he's got the answer. He's one of those, he stands on his record, has for a long time, does it for the most part to keep voters from taking a good look at it. But he refuses to answer any questions on the ground that could eliminate him. What I like best about him is he's one of those, he realizes now, and he realized early on, you really have to study both sides of any given issue. There's no other way you can get around it. Get around the issue. I wrote some of these myself, you know. These aren't... I gave Cunningham the ones that were kind of on the cusp. Should have seen how far he was willing to go. He's a man in his district, he will do anything for the worker, just short of becoming one. When Mike Fox is on the program, one of the biggest pluses, there are those times of the year, around this time of the year, shortly after the holidays, before spring, you're kind of low on commercials. In my line of work, you don't play a record. You pretty much have to work until a commercial comes on. Mike Fox is one of those where if you need a trip to the men's room, only works if he's on the phone. If he's in the room, he knows you're gone. If he's on the phone, it could be as simple as, Mike, what about the weather? You're out the door, you're down the hall, you come back, he's still going on about the weather. The man is an absolute dream. 20 years, he's a hell of a politician. In the short amount of time I've known him, I've grown to respect him. He's a sharp man. He's not a cheap politician. At $120 for roast beef? Far from a cheap politician. And I guess in closing, the one thing I've noticed, mainly from what I've taken up from hearing the speakers who were here before me tonight, and it's a new side of Mike that I was unaware of, is basically that when he does ask you to vote for him and to vote for good government, what he's in fact asking for are 2 votes. I want to thank you a great deal for having me out here tonight, Mike. I've had a marvelous time, and whether news is slow or news is happening, it's always a pleasure to have you on the program. We'll do it again real soon. Man gets more airtime than any state politician anywhere around here, and for good reason. Mike Fox, congratulations.
Well, if that's how you get on the air, I'm going to have to become a politician. Thank you, Mike. You notice the real friends, as soon as other people finish, they leave, like it's the Tonight Show, and they're too big to stay with the other speakers. Mike, your show's not till Monday afternoon. I mean, at least Cunningham could say he had to run. I understand. Mike McConnell, ladies and gentlemen. Great commentator, and my parents love him, I might add. But right now, here comes another one of our own, someone who has represented us well, who served with Mike in the Ohio legislature, side by side. We're honored to have him here tonight. In a very short time in Congress, he has made his presence felt in Congress. Some of you have heard of the Gang of Seven. He's provided leadership. Also, instantly, in a very short period of time in Congress, he's been not only a leader in Ohio politics, but is beginning to make a headway in Washington. And before I bring him, I don't want to take away anything, and it's not a night to roast him, but I was back in Washington for the presidential election, and I was at the Capitol Hill Club, and I was in awe that I was there with the chairman of the RNC, and they were telling me why and how we were really going to win, and why I should really not be afraid to speak out as an entertainer, that it wouldn't hurt my career. And I was wondering about Congressman Boehner, who was brand new from our district, and I had heard that he was making great strides, and I looked down at the Republican newsletter, and it says, Boehner wins congressional golf tournament. And we are honored to have him here tonight. He is the United States representative of the 8th District of Ohio. He's a rising star in the Republican Party of Ohio, Congressman John Boehner, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, Ray, thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It's certainly a pleasure to be here with you. I'm really surprised that I am here, though. You know, there were hundreds of people around the state of Ohio who wanted to be here tonight to have a shot at Mike Fox. Hundreds. I know I heard from most of them who kept calling me all week, giving me stories that I might relay to all of you. But they're not here, and I am. I found it interesting that Corwin Nixon gave a little presentation while we were eating dinner. Based on what he had to say, I think he filmed this about 15 years ago. You know, Corwin's got the best hair in Columbus. And Mike, I think it's time to call Dick Celeste. Call Dickie and tell him the president's plan is dead, his job's over. In a couple of weeks, he'll be back in Ohio looking for another job. But it really is good to be here. With all of you, you know, in life we celebrate a lot of things. But 20 years of Mike Fox in public service, I had to ask myself, well, how do you do that? They didn't say, well, you didn't have to say you liked it, you just have to recognize it. So I'm here, but I really was surprised. You know, over the years, Mike and I have had a rather tenuous relationship at times. I think all of you know that. And kind of reminds me of the Mexican fable. You know, the story about the turtle and the scorpion. Turtle was on the edge of the Rio Grande River, and he was about ready to cross, and his scorpion came along and said, hey, Mr. Turtle, I'd like to have a ride over. And the turtle looked at him rather hesitantly and said, well, I'm not sure. And turtle promised him, or the scorpion promised him he'd be good. And so he climbed on, and off they started. And about halfway across the river, the scorpion bit the turtle right on the back of the neck. And the turtle whipped his neck around and said, why did you have to do that? We're both going to die. And the scorpion got this big grin on his face and said, in a rather apologetic tone, well, I'm sorry, it's just my nature. I think all of you know in this room that in 1990, I wasn't Mike's first choice for this congressional seat. As a matter of fact, I was a rather long way down the list. Of course, at the top of the list was Mike's own name. So after the primary, a friend of mine suggested that I call Mike, and I asked him for his help in the general election. And I thought about it, and I was trying to find something that was comparable to asking Mike Fox for his help and receiving it. And the only thing I could think about was calling up the Boston Strangler and asking him for a neck massage. You know, Mike has all the characteristics of a dog, except loyalty. This is a roast, right? Now, somebody had to do the dirty work. That's why they invited me. One day, a certain state senator stopped me, and he said, Boehner, you know, if you had Muammar Gaddafi, and you had Saddam Hussein and Mike Fox in a room, and he had a gun, and you only had 2 bullets, you know what you do? I said, no. He said, you shoot Fox twice. Mike, now you think about all those state senators who might have said that. You might be able to find one of them. You know, being in politics with Mike teaches one the art of diplomacy. It's kind of like Tanya Harding told Nancy Kerrigan this afternoon, break a leg. You know how Mike taught his son about politics? He put him on top of a ladder, stood out and stretched his arms and said, "Okay, son, jump." As he stepped aside and his son crashed to the ground, he said, "There, that'll teach you to trust politicians." You know, Mike is often accused of not being as supportive of the Republican Party as some would like him to be. And I'm here to tell you, Mike, that's simply not true. And all of you, it's not true. As you all know, Mike is about as cheap as they get. Thankfully, he's turned this into a virtue. And during election time, he gets so cheap trying to save money for his campaign that he doesn't leave any tips. But when he gets up, and all he does is look at the server and say, "Don't forget to vote Democrat." You know, it's not hard to see why people have a tough time trying to figure out whether Mike Fox is a Democrat or a Republican. He eats like an elephant, and he acts like a jackass. It kind of reminds me of something the great late Speaker of the House, Sam Rayburn, was fond of saying, "Some men grow in office, others just swell." I saw Mike one day in the gym at the Capitol Club in Columbus, and needless to say, I was pretty surprised that I saw Mike there. I said, "Mike, I'm really surprised to see you here. I didn't know you were a member here." He said, "Oh, yeah." He says, "I've been a member here for years. I just didn't know they had a gym." Well, when I was in Columbus with Mike, he was notorious for his organizational abilities. It's not that Mike is messy. It's just that he makes Oscar Madison look like Felix Unger. Occasionally, in the name of good government, he would send one of our pages out to clean his car. And somewhere between the official documents, the newspapers, those half-eaten Big Macs, and even a few days later, the pages would return to work, usually renewed by the experience. I've heard him say, "What a great exercise in democracy." Mike knows this is true. Walking into Mike's office reminds me of a sign I saw in a hardware store one time. It said, "We've got it if you can find it." Now, if you haven't been in Mike's office and if you haven't heard about it, there was only one office in the history of mankind that was worse, and that was Bob Netzley's, who had documents that went back over 30 years. But Mike's office used to be around the corner from me. I used to have Joanne Davidson's office right around the corner from Mike's when I got there in 1985. This podium would not fit in that office. I'm serious. It was a broom closet. But Mike has this keen ability to evaluate almost anything. It's kind of like the time that he had a late education meeting one Tuesday night, and he had to go back to his office afterwards, and so he was reading some documents and happened to fall asleep. While he was asleep, the security guards came around, certainly couldn't see him in his office, and they turned all the lights off. Now, this is a true story. And sometime in the middle of the night, Mike woke up, scurrying around, trying to find where he was, trying to find the lights. He couldn't figure it out, and finally, after thinking about it, it came to him. He knew then that he was blind. It's a true story. You know, I'm really glad that Mike made it here tonight on time. Mike greeted me at the door. It's the first time in the history that Mike's ever been on time for anything. And I understand when they were starting to put this event together, they thought about having a breakfast. When they realized they couldn't expect Mike there before 10 o'clock, they thought they better change it. Well, there was one occasion in the 10 years that I've known Mike Fox when he's been on time. And that was at my birdie hunt, my golf outing last year out at Beckett Ridge. We had a problem. They had a group out the morning before. Our event got pushed back an hour and a half, and Mike showed up just on time. You should have seen the look on his face when he realized he had to play all 18 holes. You know, I've had this birdie hunt for 10 years, and for 10 years I've invited Mike. 5 of those 10 years, Mike showed up, late, of course. The other 5 years, we never did figure out what happened to him. But speaking of golf, I've got to tell you a story that's one of the funniest things that's ever happened to me in my life. One day they called off session the next day, and I got a call about playing golf at Muirfield Village Golf Club with a friend of ours. Early 7:30 one morning. So I go out there, I warm up, I go to the first tee with our host, and he said, "Have you seen Fox?" I said, "No, I haven't seen him." Well, he said he and some other guy are supposed to be here. So it comes to our appointed time, the starter pushes us off. It's my first time playing Muirfield. I'm excited. Hit this great drive, and we play the first hole. Always turning around to see if Mike and this other person are coming. Never did see him coming. So we got to the second tee, and all of a sudden I see Mike and this other fellow and these two caddies running down the first hole. So we wait for him, and we tee off. And I'm looking at Mike. And he's got this baggy pair of shorts on that down over his knees. This is long before it became fashionable. I think they were purple. And I think he had this red shirt on that was too big for Mike. You imagine. Because the shirt came halfway down to his knees. Then he had this pair of golf shoes on that, I don't know if he borrowed them from Goodwill. But Mike hits this great drive. And so we're walking down a hall, down the second fairway, this host and I on one side, and I see Mike and this other fellow who I'd met, but I didn't know who he was, walking down the other side of the fairway. And finally I look over at Mike and I say, "Hey, Fox, how about tucking in your shirt? Somebody might think you're from Hamilton." Just teasing Mike. And so Mike's walking down the fairway, and he unbuckles his pants. This is at Muirfield Village. It's kind of the mecca of golf, and he tucks his shirt in. So we hit our shots up toward the green, and I'm on the green, and Mike's friend is over on my side of the green with me, and we're lining up our shots, and I say to him, "I'm really sorry I didn't get your name." He says, "Oh, I'm Joe Kakuzo." I said, "Well, what do you do?" He said, "I'm publisher of the Hamilton Journal." I don't know that I've ever been that embarrassed. You know, just after the state legislature redistricted Mike's district, he stopped in this hair salon one day, and he said to this lady running, he said, "Hi," he says, "I'm Mike Fox, and I'm running for state representative in the new 59th House District." And the lady looked at him and said, "Well, that's funny. My gals and I around here were just laughing about that this morning." So then he went next door to a tavern, and he introduced himself to the bartender. And the bartender quickly said, "Yes," he says, "I've heard of you." He said, "Now I'm going to give you time to tell the rest of the story." But just after Mike talked to the bartender, guy at the end of the bar says, "You know, that politician, he's a horse's ass." Some other guy came across the bar and punched this guy at the end of the bar, punched him right in the mouth. And the bartender looked at the second fellow and said, "Hey, you must be a real fan of Mike Fox." He said, "No, not at all." He says, "This is horse country." Mike, you know, recently had a birthday. He was 45. He always stays a year ahead of me. I really can't believe it, Mike. You don't act a day over 14. You know, thinking back to 1990, I have to admit how wrong I was when I was thinking that Mike Fox wasn't qualified to be a member of Congress. Then we found out he couldn't balance his checkbook. Well, Mike, you have a broad base of support. You've all seen the pages of accomplishments, 31 pages of accomplishments that he sent out. It's a rather impressive list, especially when you consider that Mike has been in the minority party for all of his career in the State House. Mike is the only legislator you know that can successfully put together a coalition of seniors, doctors, Medicaid recipients, and Hell's Angels. Oh, I'm sorry, Mike. Motorcycle enthusiast. Well, I guess it's time to say all of the nice stuff, Mike, but I ran out of notes. I think all of you know that Mike and I have a love-hate relationship. We really are good friends today. But we both have a deep respect for each other. I know the years that I spent with Mike and the years since, Mike is certainly one of the most creative legislators that we have in Columbus. He's a gentleman who works hard, fights hard for what he believes in, and along the way has taught me many, many lessons that I'll never forget. He's a friend to all of us in this room. We're proud of him, and we want to wish you, Mike, another 20 years of success in government. Thank you.
well done. Well done. It's a very amazing story, and only those of you not from this area might be offended that Congressman Boehner would have made a joke about Hamilton, the way dressing that way, that could have qualified him to be the mayor, literally. There's nothing, I mean, that just shows that you did not know the constituency, and again, what you found as an embarrassing moment on your golf course, to anyone in this room knows it's not the first time that Mike Fox showed his butt. Nor will it be the last, and he doesn't have to have on a big shirt to do it. If we could thank one person here tonight who really is responsible for helping get the excitement and enthusiasm of politics or government into the blood of Mike Fox, is our next speaker. 24 years ago, he gave Mike Fox his first job in politics. He was then the organizational director for the senatorial candidate Robert Taft. Mike was hired for campaign operations for 13 counties at a salary of $100 per week. Overpaid by my standards, by what I know he did. But the person who hired him at the time went on to become the chairman of Cuyahoga County Republican Party, and today he is the chairman not only of the Ohio Republican Party, but I will tell you that he is the president, or he's the chairman of what could be the most important state in the United States of America, and picking what senator will represent Ohio in the years to come. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud to have you bring to the podium Mr. Robert Bennett. Bob Bennett.
Well, I was going to start off with the confession that I have kept a secret all these 24 years, that I did bring Mike Fox into his first paid political job. And I hope that you will all forgive me for that disastrous deed. You know, I want to tell you something. Mike sent me out some information in advance of coming down here tonight. Nice letter, thanking me for agreeing to be a celebrity roaster, and enclosing material for your review which highlights some of my legislative accomplishments and activities. Celebrating 20 years of leadership makes a difference. This is 37 pages. Mike, State Representative Mike Fox, a legislative record, that's 31 pages. Listen, Ruth Ann and I have known Mike since 1970. He was a regional Taft campaign director. And as many of you know, knowing Mike just for 1 year is an experience, but to know him for 20 years, 24 years, that's outrageous. You know, throughout these last 24 years, I've accumulated some stories, both Ruth Ann and I have, that I'd like to share a couple of them with you. The first one is, I titled is Razzle Finds a Second Home. And when Mike and sometimes Rick Siegel would come up and have some business in Cleveland, they'd stay at the house, and our house out in Fairview Park, and no member of our family would be more excited about seeing Mike than our little Chinese pug, a little dog called Razzle. And the reason that Razzle was excited is because when Mike came with his suitcase. Now, you have to first know that Mike lived out of his suitcase in those years. And it contained a combination of things, both clean and dirty clothes, mostly dirty, personal hygiene supplies, which consisted of a razor and a bottle of cheap cologne, and remnants of his last meal, which he would save for later, such as a half-eaten Big Mac and a candy bar. And during Mike's first visits, it seemed strange to the family that whenever Mike visited our home, Razzle couldn't be found. But as soon as Mike would leave, Razzle would come out from her hiding place. After Mike's several visits, we learned that Razzle wasn't hiding at all. He was just living in Mike's suitcase. Mike's suitcase was Razzle's portable dream home. After all, to Razzle, it smelled good, made a comfortable bed, and was stocked with food. What more could a dog ask for? Second story I'll tell you is kind of like Mike's time problems. We've all had it. Mike's never has shown up on time for any meeting with me in 24 years. If he ever did, I'd be the most shot guy in the world. But this was a weekend visit. Mary Ann was joining us on Saturday. Mike was coming up on Friday night. This started out, I'll be up there about 7 o'clock. I got a lot of political items to go over with you. Okay. Get a call about 9. I'm on my way. I'll be there by the time the 11 o'clock news. Get a call at 11. I'm just getting ready to leave. I got held up. I'll see you. Showed up about 1:15. We sat up and talked to about 3:30, and I said, Mike, I got a 8:30 meeting downtown. I'm going to bed. Mike said, well, we'll talk tomorrow. I don't have anything to do till later on, Saturday evening. I went downtown. I came back home. Had a meeting with some of my young friends concerning some sailing in the afternoon about 2 o'clock. I walked in about 1:15, and Ruth Ann says, I'm concerned. She says, Mike's still sleeping. He missed breakfast. And I looked at my watch, and I said, hell, he's missed lunch. I said, let him sleep. We went about and finished our business, and about 4 o'clock, I think Mike got up. Came in, we were about that time getting ready to celebrate. We were going to have a little spaghetti dinner. Had about 15, 20 people in. I said, Mike, what can I get you? We had some snacks out on the bar there, some peanuts and popcorn. Mike says, I have a scotch. Pretty soon he had another scotch. Pretty soon another scotch. Spaghetti time came around. And about this time, Mary Ann showed up. Says, we got to get some food in this boy. And I remember Mike sitting down at the end of the table just like it was yesterday, and I saw him with this plate full of spaghetti and some meatballs there. And Mike was taking those meatballs and he's dropping them in Razzle's mouth about one at a time. And I said, Mike, aren't you going to eat that stuff? And he'd roll that fork a little bit and get a little spaghetti, and I think he got about 2 mouthfuls, and I looked down at the end of the table, and all of a sudden Mike's laying right on the table, sound asleep, and his chin was about 2 inches from the spaghetti plate. Mary Ann retrieved Mike that evening, took him back into the bedroom. He got up the next morning about 9 o'clock, 9:30, made a phone call and said, found out that the county chairwoman, I think Edna Fath, was it, Mike, had passed away, and Mike says, I have to get back to Hamilton. And we fixed a quick breakfast, and he left. Now, I figured that Mike had showed up sometime Friday night. He left sometime Sunday, and we concluded about 2 hours of politics right after he arrived and didn't have any time for anything else because Mike was sleeping or eating all the rest of the time. You know, being chairman of the Republican Party, I do have access to an extensive clipping file in Columbus. So this past week, I dug out our file on Mike Fox. Some of these clips date back to when Mike was in his first term in the Ohio House of Representatives. So I put together a brief outline, which I'm calling the Distinguished Public Service Career of Mike Fox. Here we go. These are headlines. Mike Fox declares himself a political gypsy. Mike Fox urges deportment of Iranian college students. Says Khomeini is a 2-bit dictator who hasn't stored up enough religious treasures in heaven to put a down payment on a harp. Great quote. Had a lot to do with Ohio politics, too. Mike Fox allegedly steals reapportionment plans from the Democrats. Mike Fox gets sued by Democrats for stealing reapportionment plans. Mike Fox's aide sues Democrats for accusing him of stealing reapportionment plans. Mike Fox gets in trouble with the Ohio Elections Commission for slanderous campaign charges against Democrats. Next one, this is the favorite one. Mike Fox ousts 2 members of Ohio GOP House leadership. Mike Fox says of House Speaker Vern Rife, quote, I think he's a darn good speaker. It's just frustrating to have to deal with him. I can see Mike getting halfway through that and thinking, I got to get back to my Republican credentials real quick. Mike Fox calls Alex Larshenkoff, who's a political chairman up in Summit County, a political pit bull who's turned on his master. Mike Fox calls for Buzz Lucan's resignation after having sex with a 16-year-old girl. Mike Fox proposes spanking high school students who do drugs, drink alcohol, and skip school. Mike Fox produces videotape on, quote, how to lobby the legislature. That was a good one. Mike Fox is accused by Democrats of making business deals with organized crime. That was a good one. This is the best one, though. Mike Fox gets beat up for no reason. And Mike Fox angers House Speaker Vern Wright by telling dirty joke during House session. No place could I find what the joke was. It's obvious that Mike Fox's political career hasn't lacked any controversy. But seriously, I know of no other representative who is more in touch with their district or works harder to meet the concerns of the people they represent than Mike Fox. Mike is in government to make a difference. He's been at the forefront on legislation ranging from education to crime to the economy, and all this in order to make government work better for the people of his district. I don't know of anybody who has more creative ideas when it comes to legislation, or nobody that you can go to and bounce an idea off of and can take an idea and make it and create a piece of legislation that will benefit the people of this district and the people of Ohio better than Mike Fox. It's been a privilege for me to work with Mike over the past really 24 years, and I think that you have one of the most dedicated legislators in the legislature in Mike Fox. And Mike, I thank you for the privilege of being with you this year.
Thank you, Bob. Great headlines. I mean, I would not consider myself ignorant, but these are things that we just don't hear down here in Hamilton. Some great quotes, but nothing surprising about Michael Fox. He is tough on crime. I remember he's gotten tougher and tougher. His first legislative act on crime, I'll never forget it. In Hamilton, in this county, he said, if you kill a man, you have to make a court appearance. It was an amazing thing. It was you couldn't mail the fine in anymore after that. It was quite a revelation to a lot of people, an eye-opener. To be the final speaker at such a cherished event, this tells a lot about the character of our representative. This is a day and a time when the word lobbyist could be considered a bad word. But those in government know that lobbyists could also be great sources of information. Be it all that they may know that lobbyists can be good or bad, no politician would hang with a lobbyist in public, or at least have them be the final speaker at their tribute, which Mike has chosen to do here tonight. He is a fellow Ohioan, but he is one of the premier lobbyists. And lobbyists get bad names sometimes like politicians do. There's a difference in being a politician and a government leader. And this individual works very close with Mike, and they are good friends. They met on the Ohio Committee to re-elect the president in 1972. They have that in common, plus neither were indicted or convicted of any criminal wrongdoings. I think my campaign slogan in that year is indictment is not a conviction. And Bob Bennett said his best, that he does know his constituency. This man coming to the podium is president and owner of the very successful Columbus-based lobbying firm. He is our final roaster before Mr. Fox will take this podium, so keep your energy up. His colleagues know him to be knowledgeable, effective, and first class, truly as a legislative assistant, if you want to know the right answers. He is the president of Thomas Green and Associates. Tom Green, ladies and gentlemen, to the podium. A man that I like to see. Come on down.
Right there. You've been waiting for that all night.
It's nice to know that if a fight breaks out, there's one person I could take in this room.
I was 6'6" when I started lobbying, Ray. Our height is not the only thing Ray and I have in common. We were both turned down by Heather Locklear. Well, maybe you've done better since then, twice. Thanks very much, Ray. It's a singular thrill for me to be here tonight and sitting with all of you, and particularly with some of the roasters. How often does a lobbyist get the opportunity to sit with probably one of the next governors of the state of Ohio, certainly the next Speaker of the Ohio House of Representatives, the great knowledgeable budget director for our state. That's good, thank you. And she thanks you. Probably the most outstanding Republican chairman in the country, two of the outstanding radio and media personalities in the world. Matter of fact, when I saw the lineup, I was excited about being here. I'm very disappointed when I got here, as I'm sure some of the others were, because I thought it was the movie actor that we were roasting. To drive all the way down here from Columbus in terrible weather to roast a two-bit politician was not something. When I came here tonight, I asked Wendy Bowermaster why I had been chosen to represent the lobbying community in this roast of Representative Fox. I never gave Mike an honorarium, probably one of the few who didn't. I have never contributed to his campaign. He always told me that he would not stop at anything to do things for me, and he certainly has not done anything for me. I never took him to lunch or dinner, although apparently others have. And I'm a Republican who generally prefers the company of Republicans who vote like Republicans. Wendy said that she had contacted more than 50 State House lobbyists, and none of them had anything good to say about Mike Fox. Now, I note some of them are here, and they all have bills, probably something to do with health care, perhaps, making sure that Mike sees them. And if they've been at this business as long as I have, they'll know it won't do them any good anyway. Apparently, I was the only one that would agree to come, and I got to say, Wendy tricked me. She told me this was a retirement party for Mike Fox. And I didn't want to miss that. It would be my fondest dream. But I made the long trip down here, bad weather, gave up the opportunity, as you all did, to watch the ice skating Snow White versus the Wicked Witch. But I really wanted to see what you folks look like. What kind of people would send Mike Fox to the legislature and do it every 2 years for the last 10 years? I mean, by now you should know about what he's doing up there. I mean, is there a better example of a public official feeding at the trough? Is this the poster child for term limits? It is true that I have known Mike Fox for a long time. Matter of fact, I knew him when he only had one chin. We both worked on President Nixon's re-election campaign. It was Mike who suggested that it would be very helpful to have some information from the Democrat headquarters. It is true. I was there when Mike first took his oath of office 20 years ago, and I'll bet you folks never dreamed what a big man Mike would become in the General Assembly. When Mike tells you he carries a lot of weight in Columbus, who could argue with that? Mike is a lobbyist's dream, the only guy who's available for dinner more than once a night. But you know, you probably are aware of this. This is all going to change. In their wisdom, the legislature recently passed a new ethics law. The law says a lobbyist cannot spend more than $75 a year on a legislator. Folks, this won't cover Mike's appetizers. This is why the new law is also known as the Mike Fox Weight Reduction Act of 1994. Obviously, Mike has enjoyed the good life, and he's not looking forward to term limits. After all, he's been a politician for most of his adult life. So what's he going to do? He's been working with a career counselor who initially tried to get him a contract as a sumo wrestler. But when that failed, they ran several personality tests and determined that Mike had some considerable acting talent. After all, he acts like a statesman for 1 month every 2 years. His agent narrowly missed getting Mike the starring role in Free Willy. But the Olympics may give Mike the break he was looking for. Casting agents are considering Mike for the role of Tonya Harding's bodyguard. I promised Mike I wouldn't talk about his sex life. He said, what was. I met his son Ryan before the dinner. His son is the exact image of Mike. But he's healthy. Oh well. You know, I renewed some acquaintance with Mary Ann. Haven't seen her in a number of years. And I remember when I talked with her at a football game many years ago, she told me of the problems of being married to an active legislator. And she said, you know, when I married Mike, I married him for mink, and what I got was a little weasel. Seriously, folks, it's nice that we're having this event for Mike tonight. Most of us think he's reached the pinnacle of his career. He went to Columbus as a state representative without any power. Chances are he'll leave Columbus as a state representative without any power. So I'd like to conclude my remarks tonight with the top 5 reasons why Michael Fox will never be Speaker of the Ohio House. Number 5, he won't fit in the chair. Number 4, the heavy betting is the next speaker will wear a dress and Mike looks terrible in drag. Number 3, he thinks managed care is limiting honoraria to $500. Number 2, there's not enough marble left in Columbus to build a Mike Fox statue. And number 1, after 22 years in the minority, Republicans are likely to choose a Republican.
Anybody see any cash change there when they shook? Yeah, that was a hug, yeah. Kind of Mike went right into his old wallet there, you know. You can tell he's a lobbyist and not a politician when he gets and says, I wanted to see what kind of people were down here. You sure got pretty mouth. Here. Happy birthday. No. That's not what this is about. It is now time. We do appreciate, one more time, Tom Green, ladies and gentlemen. Would you give him a round of applause for coming all the way from Columbus? And all the great people who have traveled so far to be here. It is now going to be the turn of the man of the evening. But before I bring him up, I want, on a serious note, to talk about something before I make a presentation, and after which he will probably get deep and serious and then take a shot at everyone else. I just want to say that I was kidding, Mike, about anything I said about you. As opposed to John Boehner. I mean, John Boehner and I have one thing in common of the two. You and I both opposed him in the general election, except he grew to like you and I still don't. And I've learned to like John. But
when it comes time to get serious, I want everybody in this room to know sometimes whether or not you realize it, whether or not you donate your time, your money, whether or not you vote, every single living human being of any level of intellect, socioeconomic background is involved in the political process, whether or not you know it. To what degree you exercise your liberty is within your power when you vote. And before I bring Michael Fox to the stage, our Declaration of Independence begins with these words. When in the course of human events, these 5 words have stood as a standard for which Americans have come to measure humanity and to formulate our vision of a representative form of government. Several generations have passed away since Thomas Jefferson authored the basis of our society's philosophy, and we still aspire to fully subscribe to his inspiration. But President Jefferson was an exceptionally talented man who was a strong proponent of education. He was fascinated by technological advances, and these interests competed constantly with his political attentions. And yet, all of this contributed into one big effort he saw for the betterment of the common man and the global view of the inalienable rights of man. However, in his terms, it was the enormity of times, as Jefferson described them, that compelled him to enter the political arena. Consistently throughout his life, he was always guided by the following philosophy. And I think we should listen to these words well. Many people claim and quote politicians who have long since come and gone, generations past. But these words that guided Jefferson compelled him into politics, to care, the care of human life and happiness, and not the destruction, is the first and only legitimate object of good government. That was what compelled him to leave the private sector and to endure whatever hardships it might take to have a representative form of government. He believed in that philosophy. Today, we are in the midst of our own enormity of times, and it's not surprising that our own representative, Michael A. Fox, has sought in many degrees the same teachings that were brought forward by Thomas Jefferson and many other mentors. Someday, will there be men and women 100 years from now that will be quoted for great sayings and standing up and picking up the standard of freedom and liberty, rather than perpetuating sayings of men who have long since died, but set the trend for a new way? When you look at the history, you can see the mistakes and you can follow the leaders. Like Jefferson, who I know Michael Fox has been very inspired by, Mike has been a strong proponent, we've said it here tonight, of education, and he has sought to reform the educational system to provide Ohio's children with a better opportunity for self-improvement. Anyone in this room that knows that once a mind has been expanded to a greater dimension, it can never return to its lesser form. He believes in the quality of education, and it's the most productive investment that we can make with our tax dollars when implemented wisely. It is a direct route to increase the prosperity of Ohioans and to solve a multitude of problems. Also, like Jefferson, Mike believes in the free enterprise system in commerce. He is tenacious. We all know that. He is once again helping to turn this into reality for his constituents with a new program of the Butler County Transportation Improvement District. Anyone knows Mike Fox knows he works relentlessly on this. He will continue to support Butler County businesses and industry until someday from I-75 you see the Hamilton Mike Way. The Mike Way that will connect us to the rest of the world. He is dedicated to enabling us to continue to grow in the future. Most of all, like Jefferson, Mike Fox continues to strive to lessen the burden of those who have sought his representation. They may say he speaks a lot, but if he was just being quiet, you can't imagine more restrictions that would be heaped upon us. We need more people that will articulate, and please forgive me when I say, to the constituents in many of the districts of Ohio, articulate is not a word you should use, who should explain the situation of Ohio, who should not expound on the problems of the world, but of Ohio. Michael Fox, like Jefferson, has embodied that spirit of dedication and patriotism, and I believe this representative form of government is embodied every 2 years while he is reelected, irregardless, or regardless, depending if you went to Garfield or Taft. I know double negatives now. I know sentence fragments and things I never knew, because I'm on TV. It is the caring of human life and happiness that our government is to ensure its people. And it is to that end that we would like to bring him to the podium, first receiving a very special presentation. If he would come forward, Michael, I would like very much. We would like to present you with this recreation, portrait of Thomas Jefferson, I know who was your mentor. On the eve of his first presidency, this was drawn by Marcia Brown. Would you stand up, Marcia, please, from Fairfield? On behalf of your constituency, this is a gift, and if you would not mind opening it at this time, perhaps you'd like to come up, Marcia, and actually, you can go ahead, Mike, and it's not the first time you've opened it before Christmas. Imagine it's a Hershey bar, Mike. I know you love Jefferson, but think of Baby Ruth. Well, folks, that's all the time we have this evening. You know, Jefferson, drawn by one of your own constituents and truly one of the great leaders of our time. Marcia, stand up one more time. It is very appropriate that you would receive this, drawn by one of your own constituents. And I know what you're thinking, Michael. Estimated street value, $200. Come up here and shake her hand. And I give you, ladies and gentlemen, our representative, Mike Fox, hugging a woman right in front of you.
It started as a re-election gathering. It's now a retirement party. I want to thank Ray and Debbie for chairing this event, and Rob and Wendy for co-chairing, and for all of you who have shared with me tonight your time. I'm touched by your presence. I know that you were touched, those of you who paid. I really am humbled by this. When we started thinking about it, I wasn't sure what would happen, so I'm very, very happy that you're here. Thank you. They talked about my record. My son, I told him in advance of this, I said, you're going to hear stories about your daddy tonight. He said, are they true? I said, I hope they don't tell the ones that are really true. You know, the 20 years in the legislature, you've seen the things that I've worked on, and I want you to know that I have to say from the outset that when you look back, and there were a lot of memories that kind of rushed by as we prepared for this program and did the research. But of all the accomplishments that I've ever done in my life, things that I've been able to play a part in making happen, there are two in particular that go beyond anything you could write on a paper, and are my son Ryan and our daughter Ashley, who gets really bored at these things. And I don't know where she is. But Ryan, would you stand up, please? Thank you. And My first campaign is noted in the program that I want to thank Rick Siegel and his people for putting together for us. As you note, see, we ran out of the basement of Mom and Dad's house on Haldeman Avenue. I just wish that Dad could be here tonight. He's deceased, but I've been blessed with two wonderful parents, and my mother was literally, there were people coming in and out of her house at all hours, and she was always there to support then and has been through the years. And Mom, would you please stand and let them see you? And my brother and my sister, who have the good sense to stay out of politics. I'd like you to meet them. You rarely see them. Rodney and Jill and my brother-in-law Jim, would you please stand? And my brother-in-law Bruce, would you stand please? Mary Ann's brother. When you go through public life, and particularly if you're as feisty as I am, there's a lot of ups and downs, and I'm very grateful. You know, they mentioned education. I'm very grateful for something that I recall from a high school teacher that she said, her name was Janet Markoff at Hamilton Taft, and she was commenting to us one day, and she said that if you depend upon the peaks to carry you through life without understanding that there'll be valleys, you're going to be very disappointed. And all of life is filled with peaks and valleys, and you have to be able to look over the horizon. And with the pressures of public life, the stresses that it puts on a family are just absolutely enormous. And someone that has endured this and has really been a trooper, and for whom I'm very grateful, I'd like you to meet my wife, Mary Ann, for those of you who are here. I want to mention there are so many people that were instrumental in making this evening a great success. And I'm just blessed having good people. I'm really honored that my colleagues are here. Joanne Davidson, who is going to be the next Speaker of the Ohio House. And Tom Johnson and Gene Krebs, Marilyn Reed, Jeff Jacobson. Jeff, Jeff said something the other day. We were talking, and I really thought this is really profound. He said there are two types of folks that get in this business. There are those folks that want to be something. There are those folks that want to do something, and those folks that want to do something just drive the folks that want to be something nuts. Because the folks that want to do something constantly create chaos and create circumstances that folks that are just happy to be there don't want to deal with. And those are really profound. That's a profound observation, but it's really an honor for me to have you here, and really for all of you. I'm blessed with a wonderful staff. Rachel Gross, Linda Good. Rachel Gross that runs my Columbus office. Linda Good, that is Hamilton Citizen of the Year and runs the Hamilton part of the operation. And I have to tell you, and I cannot begin to thank this person enough. Many of you have grown to know her. After the last election, this person managed my campaign. And people seemed so removed from government that we decided that we were going to make a rather substantial investment in trying to bring government a little closer to people. So embarked upon the idea of having a district service office and essentially funding it out of campaign funds that you're generous enough to donate. And let me tell you, it's really made a difference in the lives of just scores of people in our area because of the work that Linda does and, of course, Rachel and the staff in Columbus. But this next person, who is just a tremendous blessing, she is my campaign manager. She is my friend. She was really the event coordinator that pulled all of this together. And Cindy Carpenter, would you please stand? And where is Cindy? You've been patient with your time, generous with your contributions, and I really, believe it or not, don't have a lot to say. I just want to share one observation made by another president that I admire, Teddy Roosevelt. And these words are really inspiring to me, and they have a lot of meaning. It's not the critic who counts. It's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit goes to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by blood and sweat and dust, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes short again and again, because without effort, there must be error and there must be shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds? Who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause? And who, in the end, at the best knows the triumph of high achievement? And who, at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place will never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. You've helped keep me in the arena for 20 years, and I thank you for that. And with your help and continued support, I'll stay there, and I'll throw the punches that you would throw if you were there. Thank you so much.